Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everybody. Sharon Torek with you here again today. And we're going to talk about something that is actually uh, a thing I get asked about quite a bit when I am out talking to agency groups, either at conferences or in meetings. And we are, obviously get asked in my life day to day owning a law firm for agencies about the topic of accessibility. And many of you who own or lead agencies have questions about accessibility and how it interplays with the work that you do for your clients. Some of you have had concerns about responsibility for accessibility. And we'll talk about that today, but I'm really excited to talk with today's guest, Mike Barton, who leads communications for a firm called AudioEye, about the opportunities as well. I just said to Mike right before we got ready to hit record, when he suggested that not only is ADA compliance, and we'll talk mostly about websites because that is really where most of you sort of live and breathe in the ADA accessibility space. But there may be other examples as well that, you know, cross-hatch into marketing. Um, we all understand that there's some legal and some compliance aspects to all of this, but Mike pointed out, and I'm so glad that he did, that this is a business opportunity for many of you and for the brands that you represent. So first of all, Mike, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate
Yeah,
you being
pleasure.
here.
Thanks for having me.
Um, so just to set the table, tell us a little bit about what Audio Eye does, and then I have so many questions for you about accessibility and the challenges and the opportunities that it raises.
Yeah, I mean, simply put, AudioEye has a product, a solution that helps companies, agencies, businesses create and maintain digitally accessible websites so that they are compliant, that the risk of legal action as part of the ADA is as low as possible, and as you said as well, that we're helping companies build those accessible sites and follow those best practices so that it impacts SEO and that their customers can have the ideal customer experience.
Mhm. So let's get the sort of the non-sexy part of this out of the way, which is the part that my firm usually gets contacted about, which is sort of the responsibility and or the potential liability as you're putting together a website or a digital product around accessibility and compliance with accessibility rules and laws. Um, I guess let's just first start with um, my point of view, if you don't mind, that
Yeah.
it's hard for folks who build and maintain these products to really know what sort of rules and restrictions they've got to play to. It reminds me a lot of data privacy, where there's lots of different rules in different states, and there's no commonality. In the disability and ADA compliance space for websites, there are standards, right?
hmm
Most of the agencies listening here have clients that are private and in industry. They're not necessarily government agencies or facilities. So let's get a common understanding, if you don't mind, about what rules do they need to be most paying attention to when they're thinking about accessibility as they build out websites, et cetera.
Yeah, so there's a set of standards called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So you'll see WCAG for short in a lot of digital accessibility content. And those are a globally recognized set of standards that, if followed, will create an accessible website. And they cover the whole gamut across principles like, is the content perceivable? Is it operable? And things of that nature. And so, kind of at the tactical level, where that manifests itself as an example is, do all of your images have the appropriate level of alt text so that a person who might have a visual impairment, who might be blind, is using a screen reader, which literally reads the code to you and the page via the code that the screen reader is reading. If that image doesn't have clear alt text associated with it, they'll just get image one, image
Mhm.
two as they're going to that page, and they're not able to. If you're selling shirts as an example, They're not able to understand what the product is. They're not able to buy. And so those types of barriers are the types of things that a person with a disability, when they encounter them, when they're not able to shop on your site, when they're not able to contact you because they want to use your services or contact you to tell you something's inaccessible, those can all turn into lawsuits. And those are the types of things that we see on a regular basis. And um, those principles are not difficult per se, but like you said, most designers, most developers don't learn any of that in school. They don't learn much of it, naturally in the agency world or the business world. And, I lived that myself. I was a marketer in communication in digital properties for 20 years. And unfortunately, I never thought about, is this PDF accessible? Is this video accessible? Are these social media posts that we're creating, are those accessible? And so once you start to think about all the digital assets on your site, the links, the images, the forms, and start to realize that one little accessibility barrier can break it down.
Mm-hmm.
I think you start to kind of be illuminating of like, oh, my site is probably much more inaccessible than I might have initially thought it was.
Okay. So, a lot of the digital tools that we all use in business every day, including the agencies listening, um, have accessibility, sort of what I'll call accessibility helpers built into them. Microsoft has it in its products, Adobe has it in a lot of its products. Um, how much can we really rely upon those sort of retail level tools in our day-to-day creation of anything that's going to end up on our website? And what do we need to be looking out for um, in terms of being able to rely on that stuff versus knowing
Mhm.
when we've got to bring in bigger guns, if you will, to make sure we're being compliant.
Yeah. So what I think is interesting that I think answers your question from a data perspective. We do something every year that we started a couple of years ago called our a digital accessibility index, where we
Hmm.
go out and we scan thousands of sites from the biggest enterprise down to, small mom and pop websites. And we compile all that, we analyze it. We found just last year that the average web page, so not the average website, every page on the website had an average of 297 errors. So the fact that, you asked about, the big companies who have accessibility built in, I'm sure a number of these websites use various tools that had accessibility built in, yet we
Hmm.
still see up to 300 issues per page. WebAIM does a yearly study as well, just of the home pages.
Right.
And over the last 6 years, they've seen like very minimal progress in the accessibility of home pages, even. And so
Mhm.
I think that kind of points out that just having maybe a tool that's kind of included as part of a larger package that you're building with, um, without internal expertise of accessibility, it's not going to get you where you need to be.
Hmm.
And we've continued to see that lawsuits doubled last year since 2020. The number of lawsuits are continuing to creep up as well.
Yeah.
So you asked what's common. Um, in that same report, we looked at what are the common issues across all these sites and across all these pages. The first I talked about earlier, images. Most
Hmm.
images are, especially with the speed of websites and the speed of creativity and the speed of and the frequency of updating websites, that's the type of stuff that's very easy to not get specific on, to not, fill in. And so images are like one of the top things that, as again, a screen reader is going through, it's really hard to know what is actually in the image, what you might be clicking through. The second is forms. So again, checkout flows, contact us, fill out this to get more information. When those are read off to somebody using an assistive technology, instead of us being able to see, okay, first name, last name, email, if it just says field one, field two, field three, they don't know what to put, right? And so again, that's a barrier that keeps them from completing something. And then the third is links, and that's kind of the similar principle. The images that you can often, as somebody who's sighted, see the words of the link, but if that text behind it just says "click here" or "learn more," They don't know where they're clicking. And so they just add steps where they have to click through, find out it's not the right page, come back, and go deeper in. So at the end of the day, uh, it can be extremely frustrating because they're spending much more time on simple tasks that, people who don't have a disability can do very easily because it's not coded correctly. And oftentimes that leads to a bad experience, that leads to them leaving and never coming back. So there's that business impact. But also, if that happens enough, you start to have raised the chances of you getting a lawsuit or a demand letter brought against you.
Right. Right. So, I mean, let's talk about the risk management from for a second before we get into the opportunities and the sunshine part of our conversation.
Yeah.
So, as someone who counsels agencies, where we usually step in is either we are helping agencies create fair contracts with their brand clients so that the responsibility for ADA website compliance and accessibility is spelled out and is fair. And of course, we advocate for the agencies because those are our clients. Um, do you have a point of view sort of on who should be assuming responsibility as websites are being developed, built, deployed for building the accessibility in? That I'll stop there. That's my first question. And maybe you don't have a strong point of view because you're sort of a third party to all these conversations, but I'd love to hear it if you do.
Yeah, there's probably the perfect world
Yeah.
response, and then there's the world we live in response. So the
Yeah.
perfect world, I think, would be every developer, every designer, everybody who's creating a website or who's creating content, anything that's digital. In a perfect world, they all understand accessibility best practices. They're thinking about that as part of the development process and the development cycle. They're thinking about tables and images. Now, that's the perfect world where we build and code very accessible sites, where on the flip side, as users begin to engage, there's actually very few errors that we need to resolve. The fact is, we're probably never going to get to the point where everybody has that foundational understanding of accessibility, um, just because that's the reality of investments and growth and limited resources inside companies. And so, what we found, and where what part of the reason AudioEye exists, is that in these companies that don't have that expertise, that don't have the resources to go out and train everybody, don't have the resources to even prioritize accessibility over some of the other business priorities that they have, we
Mhm.
provide tools and human expertise to, once the site is built, put a layer of technology on that site and complement that with humans doing audits, experts in the field. And then we work with that company to find an approach that works for them, whether that's giving them fixes that their developers can implement at the source code level, or
Mhm.
using the technology on their site to essentially fix those issues so that as I go and visit their webpage, while the underlying code might be inaccessible, the code that I'm getting in my browser is accessible. So using a screen reader, you'd get the accessible content
Mhm.
that is there. I think that's the way that the accessibility scales in the future, especially as the internet is exploding. As I said, sites are getting more complex, more dynamic. So you've really got to look at that approach of using technology mixed with human expertise to really get that solution that scales.
And do you usually see the breakdown occur in the iterations of these sites as they're updated or expanded, or is it usually like an origin story problem where they're launched in the first place without a minimum basis of accessibility?
It's more so the latter that,
Okay.
yeah, it just gets launched, and of course becomes really hard to go back and fix all that.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that, again, going back to the dynamic nature of the web, is if we were to have a human go through and audit all the pages or the key pages on your site or some of our listeners' sites, they get that. Hopefully, they provide fix recommendations also, not just a list of what's wrong. That's where
Mhm.
sometimes things go south also, is people or developers with no expertise get a list of problems, but they don't know then what to do with them or how to fix them. But
Mhm.
by the time they get those, understand the fix and go into actually work that into their next sprint cycle, those pages could have changed again. And so all that information that you have that needs to be fixed, some of it might still be relevant, but you're kind of in this cycle of, right, constant catch up
Mhm.
because those sites are so dynamic and ongoing. So it's almost a treadmill, right? That you feel like you're doing
That's
all
what I'm
this
getting.
work,
Yeah.
you're doing things, you are trying, but you step off and you realize I haven't gone anywhere. I've done a
Yeah.
lot of work, but I'm still in the same place I was.
Right. Exactly. So. All right, so I mean, what I'm translating from everything you just said is that really this is a party everybody needs to be attending, and that the responsibility and probably the liability should be shared between whoever's launching the site, the brand, and then whatever agency or developer is involved in the creation. It's a team effort. It's what I'm extracting from what you said. All right, so then let's talk about the sunshine part of this, which is the business and financial opportunities and upsides of building compliance into your standard operating procedures as you get websites out there and deploy them and update them. So I'd love to hear your perspective on paying attention to this as a moneymaker for a business versus just a compliance headache.
Yeah. I love the idea, and I probably overuse it when I talk to people of the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think
Hmm.
accessibility is a rising tide that lifts all boats. So let me talk about what some of those boats are in this situation. So one, the customer experience. That's like the buzzword among probably many of your listeners, and rightly so, among SaaS and tech companies. You want to have the most easy to use, the clearest, yeah, in many cases, kind of the most beautiful combined with all that, so that your customers feel like there's a connection with that brand, right? And they also want to be able to experience your brand, whether that's a product, a service, content consumption, uh, as easily as possible. And they want to consume it in a way that is personalized to them. uh, what we found is that the principles of accessibility, where you're building your site more cleanly, you're looking at your H1s and your H2s, you're looking at the navigation, you're looking at the page structure. When you build a site so that it works well for a person with a screen reader, or so that it works well with somebody who might not be able to use a mouse, so they can only use their keyboard to tab around,
Hmm.
that makes the experience that much better for everybody else as well, because you're just cleaning up a lot of the kind of the unspoken friction that exists on those pages. So that's the first one, is customer experience. If you're looking at business growth, SEO, when you build a site accessibly as well, as you're putting in the key detail of those images, the key calls to action and the key links, having all that content there, we found that that impacts SEO. And more as we move into an AI first world, where
Hmm.
people are moving from their search engines to Claude or ChatGPT and asking questions there. Or even starting to get really into the future, they're creating agents who go out and do the work for them. These AI systems are crawling that same content. And so, again, the more accessible it is, the easier it is for that AI system to crawl it, to understand it, and then get that information cleanly back to the user. So
Okay.
that's the second.
So,
Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. No, so it's enhancing the findability of a
Yes.
brand in both whether it's AEO or GEO or whatever EO you
Yep.
like to think about.
Yeah.
It's the things you need to do to be accessible are some of the same things you need to do to improve your chances of being found via an AI platform, is what I'm
Yes. That
hearing.
was
Okay.
perfectly, and what much better summarized than what I just said. So thank you.
No,
Um,
no, I mean, I think that the bottom line is we're looking for the silver linings here in terms of how we can help put more money in our brand's pockets, right, as an agency, in addition to keeping them out of the legal trouble that costs them money, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say the third boat too, which, talking about money here,
Yeah.
as you just did, what companies are also, I think, especially in today's economy and environment, which I feel like I say every year. So, right, it's like that's a
Yeah.
common thread. Um, you want to either get more customers for your same budget as last year or reduce budget, or you want to get more out of the customers that you already have. And what we see with people with disabilities, one of the common misconceptions is the idea that they're a small minority. It's a small group of people
Mhm.
on the internet. When the reality is, in the US, 1 out of 4 people have a disability of some sort. Globally,
Wow.
it's about 15 to 20%. Again, across, auditory, vision, cognitive, mobility. Um, there's just a lot more people than I think a lot of businesses assume. So let's talk about the spending power, because that's,
Right.
again, turning it back to the money. In the US alone, the discretionary spending power of people with disabilities is almost $500 billion. As we
Wow.
expand that out to the global space, and then I like to also expand it out to not just people with disabilities, but their friends and family, that becomes a $13 trillion market there. And we find very quickly that people with disabilities, because there's so much inaccessibility out there, when they find an accessible site, when they find an accessible, going back to the t-shirt example, clothing store online, they are going back because that means they don't have to deal with all that frustration they'll get anywhere else. And
Mhm.
what do? They tell their friends about it. They tell their family about it. And those friends and family very often want to support the same businesses that their person with a disability, has found success with. And so that's where you not only find loyalty with the people with disabilities who are able to now navigate your site and, complete actions, but that opens it up to friends and family as well. So you have a much more loyal customer base. And the example we like to use is when you have an inaccessible website, it's the equivalent of having your physical door at your brick and mortar store closed and locked. So
Right.
they're coming, they're trying to enter, they're trying to engage with you, but
Mhm.
they're just not able to. And so what do? They're going to go down the road to their competitor who does have that digital door open.
Right. Do you see what's the trend you see in web accessibility compliance? Let's just talk about the US if you know. Is are we getting better as a country? Or have we leveled out, or do you see accessibility efforts sort of waning?
So um, accessibility efforts at the company level. Um, I'll speak to the kind of legal that we've seen, and then I'll transition that to the company. We're seeing federal suits kind of even out, and there's still a good amount, but they're not really increasing. But at the
Hmm.
state level, we're starting to see those are increasing year over year quite a bit. And that's actually where a good chunk of the growth in ADA web accessibility lawsuits comes from. And the reason there is because in a lot of these states, you don't have to be based there as a business to be
Right.
sued in that state, right? As long as you have a customer who's buying something from you. California, I think, kind of kicked this off with the UNRRA Act 20 or so years ago, that essentially said that, right? That you don't have to be based as a business in the state of California for action to come against you. And so we see more and more of that, and states are becoming uh, aware of that. Just in of 2 months now, in April, the Title II is enforcing, where government municipalities need to have their sites be compliant as well,
Mhm.
and that's going to be kind of launching in April of this year, 2026. So, from a business perspective, how is that impacting the way businesses are thinking about it? We are seeing more and more businesses become aware of it. In the past, maybe 3 to 5 years ago, there's a lot of, hey, I've been sued. What do I do now? Right? Coming to someone like you and say, where do I
Yeah.
even go for something like this? But people are becoming more aware. That's partly why I'm coming on podcasts like this to, spread that awareness and hope that businesses say, hey, let's protect ourselves from this risk and the cost there, but also let's do it because there's a business impact that we can have that can help us be more efficient in our spend and in our with our customers. And we haven't even talked about probably the most important, but that often doesn't quite make its way into a business presentation, is just the right thing to do, right? I think once
I was going to
businesses,
ask you,
yeah,
yeah, about the moral imperative here. I mean, if you take the regulatory risks and the litigation risks and put them aside for a minute, and that was very helpful context about federal versus state activity there. But that aside, I guess what I'm curious about is do we know whether private enterprises, companies, whether big or small, are voluntarily getting better at building their websites to be more compliant? Is this something that businesses are embracing at a higher level of frequency than they used to, say, 10 years ago? What do
yeah.
you think about that?
I think it's definitely trending in that direction. That being said, I think it's still a very small subset of businesses who are prioritizing it, who have, for example, a chief accessibility officer who sits, as part of their C-suite, who is building accessibility maturity programs across their company. Again, that we've just been talking about digital accessibility. There's accessibility that HR needs to be thinking about in terms of
Right.
how they find new talent, how they find diverse talent, make sure that they're interviewing people with disabilities, that the forms and the interview process and all those are accessible as well. Procurement, it really does, the more you think about it, start to kind of manifest throughout the organization. So
Mhm.
more and more we are seeing that. I think the pattern I've noticed is company gets sued, and this
Mhm.
is kind of the previous pattern, but company gets sued, they tackle accessibility because they have to. They then start to see the ancillary benefits that come with it. Then they also start to see, hey, this isn't just good for the business. Like I should have been doing this the whole time. So I think it kind of leads to the moral thing. I do think more and more as things are evolving, I think the lawsuit, while it continues to be a driver, I don't think that's the primary driver anymore. I think people are starting to, especially as so many products and services become commoditized,
Mhm.
uh, companies or people want to work with companies that have more of a purpose, right? They want purpose-driven brands. And so I think companies also are starting to see that's a way that not only can they differentiate themselves from competitors, but by doing a good thing and doing something they should do, that's something they
Mhm.
can lean into also and make
Mhm.
that part of their marketing, make that part of their brand that, we think inclusively, we build accessibly and things like that.
Right. Well said. So let's say you're a web development agency or you're a marketing agency that offers web development, web design services, and you and your brand clients, you want to do the right thing. I mean, not only do you want to avoid having legal issues, but you want all the upsides that you were talking about earlier. You want customer stickiness, you want return business, you want the customer experience to be well received, all of that. But maybe you don't have as many technical chops as you might need to build the thing in a compliant manner, or you don't really know how to make sure you're putting your best foot forward when it comes to accessibility.
Mhm.
Um, I know this is one of the reasons your company exists, but what are some things agency leaders, owners, developers can do? Some low-hanging fruit, whether it's questions they can ask their clients or whether it's tools that they can use. What are some of the most widely available things and methods that these agencies can employ to do better when it comes to digital accessibility?
Yeah. I would say we look at like a three-pronged approach that I
Mhm.
think works for most companies. The first is having an automation tool that is on your site that is just constantly running, and when those inaccessible um, code snippets kind of do make it through,
Mhm.
that automation is able to recognize that, put a fix in place and serve the accessible experience to that end user. Now, automation only covers of those WCAG criteria that we talked about earlier. It can only identify about 50% realistically. So there have been some companies in the past who have said, hey, use our tool and you'll get fully compliant. That's caused a host of issues as well and
Right.
lawsuits there because the reality is because accessibility is so contextual, it is so complex, no tool on will do everything. So I say start there though. Like if you can get 50% automated and fixed, then you're headed in the right direction.
Right.
We then like to say the second prong is complement that with human expertise. So find your key high traffic pages, find your common templates, have somebody go through and audit that and find out what are the issues that you have, and then that person can identify those, hopefully have the expertise to write a fix and hand that to your development team so they know very clearly, here's what I need to do to make those fixes. Or what we do, which is a little bit different, we take those fixes that the humans found and put those into the automation layer. So automation is serving at that point, a vast majority of your fixes. So that's
Hmm.
kind of the, hey, I just want to, on the post development side, keep it all accessible. I think that's the approach we've seen works the best. And then we also do offer an SDK tool where if companies really have that gumption and they want to build accessible from the start, that same automation and those same sets of rules can be infused into the development cycle so the developers can test their site before it goes live, catch those issues, catch those bugs, get them fixed, send out a much more accessible site, and then that same automation, right, as things do slip through, can go in and fix those. So it is a combination. It might sound complex as I share it for a minute or two,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, um, it's something that scales, and it is something that, again, helps to minimize the risk. And there are ways that you can do it that definitely allow your business to keep doing the things it's good at and the things that it's always done.
Well, I mean, to your point a minute ago, just even regularly using the automation tool is going to get you 50% of the way there. So the margin of improvement from doing nothing to doing that
Yeah,
is hugely significant. And then just adding the human in the loop of the whole thing gets you even farther. So, and those are solutions that can scale from the smallest of agencies to the largest of
exactly.
them, right? Which I
Yep.
always love offering. I love offering tools and solutions that any size of an agency could can adopt at
Yeah.
some level or another. This has been really helpful and also educational for me. My firm deals with this from a risk management perspective. So we're creating contract language on this point, and we're, taking the calls from the occasional agency whose client has gotten one of these lawsuits.
Right.
But the actual technical um, basis for making your site compliant and as well as the financial upsides that can be achieved are not somewhere where I live and play every day. And so this has been a learning for me as well. And so, Mike, I want to thank you for sharing some of your wisdom with us. And I'd love it if you would tell agencies listening how they can learn more about AudioEye and how to get in touch with you if they'd like to do that.
Yeah, I think the best way, as I stated at the beginning, I think most companies under guess how inaccessible their site is. So I would head over to audioeye.com. At the top there, you'll see a button to scan your site. You can put in your URL, and our automation will go out, scan your site, and tell you how many errors we found. It'll also break it down and tell you like how many were severe versus non-severe, i.e which ones could get you sued.
Yeah,
And again, that's only about 50% of what automation. So whatever high number you see there, the reality is if we then audited with a human or a person with disability, they'd find more as well. And
right.
often the types of things they find are the types of things that they get you sued. So I think start there, start with awareness, right? Start with an understanding of where your site is at. And then from there, we have learning courses that teach best practices,
Mhm.
the basics of web accessibility. I think from there, it's, depending on your business and what your needs are, we can go with you from there. So
Okay. Amazing. Mike Barton, Audio Eye, thank you so much for joining us today on Innovative Agency. I learned a lot. I think everybody else listening will as well. And so I appreciate your time today.
yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining us. And until we all meet again on the next episode, everybody stay well.